Welcome to Off the Wall. My name is Trey. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out the show this week. We've got a bucket list guest on the program. This week, we've got Ari Wolfe, the one and only, join the program to talk about his journey through sports broadcasting, not just in arena football, but in the sports landscape as well, and what led him to the IFL this season and back to the broadcast booth. So very exciting conversation with him that probably could have gone on for hours, but we managed to keep it to a manageable level. So I'm sure we'll have some additional conversations in the future, but very excited for you guys to dive into that. We'll go through week 15 of the IFL season. Very exciting week of games. It's kind of like a rivalry week in some ways. So we'll dive into those games, talk about the NAL Championship, and then some AF1 action as well. But before we dive into any of that stuff, it's time for social plugs. That's right. If you don't already, please make sure you're following us on all of our socials at Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball. Off the Wall FB. We're on Instagram, X/Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. If you're there, we're there. Give us a follow and come join the conversation. Love chopping it up with folks about the 50-yard indoor game, arena game, whatever your flavor is. If you like only one, cool. If you like them all, cool. Join the club. So love chopping it up with folks on there. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. Thank you for being here. Please make sure you're subscribing to the channel and liking the video as well. Helps the algo boost this out to some other folks that may like it as well. So and then call to action. We need a call to action for this episode. So we've got the IFL expanding into Athens and Austin. That's confirmed. It looks like we're going to hear a team name or some finalists for a team name in Athens this upcoming Monday after this drops. And we're getting a coach on the same day that this drops as well announced. So give me your team name ideas for the Athens, Georgia franchise that's going to be owned by Jerome Bettis. I believe it's David Pollock and Brian Jordan. I think those are the three names that were attached to it. Let me know what name ideas you guys have. Throw it in the comments on YouTube, or you can throw it in a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can go, if you're listening there, please rate the show 5 stars, preferably, and share it with a friend. And let's continue to grow this thing out. And it's been really cool to see, and all the love and support so far from this so-called podcaster has been very, very welcomed and much appreciated. So offthewallfb.com. We got some picks blogs dropping every week. We'll probably drop this one on Saturday since the games are starting on, I think, Saturday afternoon this upcoming weekend. And then Royal Retro's got the affiliate link below. So just scroll down just a little bit, click through that link. If you buy something from that website and use code OFFTHEWALL, you get 10% off. They got some really cool stuff on there for AF1, some old school Arena Football League stuff, as well as I think they have some old NFL Europe stuff, which is a little teaser with part of the conversation that we had with Ari Wolfe. So little teaser. Didn't even mean to do it, but it happened. So what we did social, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, website, Royal Retros. That's it. Here's the conversation with Mr. Ari Wolfe. All right, on the show this week, we have one of the more recognizable voices in arena football history. You can see him on the call or on the sidelines in the IFL this season is the one and only Ari Wolfe. Ari, appreciate you hopping on here with me. How are things going in your world?
My life is going great, Trey. I'm having a ball being a part of the Indoor Football League. This season's been a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot, but it's just exciting to be back in the game. I was away from, the indoor sport after having been in the Arena League for so many years. So I'm just thrilled to be back and looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, we're going to deep dive into some of that history with the original AFL way back in the day. But I kind of want to hear, what was your introduction to the world of arena football, and how did you get your foot in the door on the broadcasting side of things?
It's a pretty good story, and it shows the power of hustle. So while I was a student at the University of Southern California, I was studying broadcast journalism. And during one of the summers I was there, they had like a broadcaster's boot camp kind of thing. And when I went there, I realized it was mainly like young kids. I think most of the kids were like 13 to 17, and I was like a 25-year-old man. Well, what happened was there was a team, the Rancho Cucamonga Piranhas. I think that's what they were called. There was an arena team in Orange County at the time. So as a part of this, we'll call it a camp, I went and called an arena game. So I had my little cassette tape of it, and I kept it with me. Well, I moved to Albany, New York to be the voice of a small Division II college basketball program, the College of St. Rose, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But our equipment manager for St. Rose was also the equipment manager for the Albany Firebirds. So I was like, you got to get me an intro. Like, I'll do anything. Well, lo and behold, the GM calls me and he's like, well, what do you know about arena football? And I'm like, I have a cassette tape. I've done arena football before. No, the Anaheim Piranhas is what they were called.
There you go. Yeah.
Cucamonga, the Anaheim Piranhas. So here I had a tape and I could show him that I'd already called a game. And I think that really helped my chances. I ended up getting that gig in the summer of 1998. And I was hooked immediately. The head coach at that time was Mike Daly, who's a legend in the sport. And he invited me to have full access. When I mean full access, unlike anything I've ever had before, I was in player meetings. I was in coaches meetings. He said, anything you want to learn, this is open to you. So I took advantage of it. I went to practice every day. I went to meetings and I thought to myself, look, I'm going to try to be the best arena football announcer I can possibly be. And given the fact that I was with a team that was voted the greatest team at the 25-year anniversary, I just got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time with great coaches. Some of the legends of the game, like Touchdown, Eddie Brown, Mike Pulowski, Greg Hopkins, Derek Stingley. So I had all these guys. I didn't know at the time what a magical time it was. I mean, we were having fun. But, now I look back at it and I thought, wow, how fortunate was I to end up in Albany and end up with the Firebirds, who to this day continue a rich tradition of success. But that 1999 team that won the championship, and we won it in our home building in Albany, that's still to this day. And I've done a bunch of stuff in my career, is still the greatest day of my career. I was young. Wow. I was hungry, and being a part of something so great that was such a family-like feel. When we traveled on the road, it was like traveling around with an extended family. So it was a hoop, but that got me started. And so all you guys who want to be announcers out there and the women who want to do it too, any chance you get to record a demo, do it, because you never know when it might pay off.
Yeah, keep it on you. You never know.
That's right. It was just with me. I had my cassettes with me. Anybody who would listen to it, I was happy to give it to them.
Well, speaking on that 99 team, that Arena Bowl, like, kind of dive a little bit more into that. Like, what do you remember most about that team and that game in particular?
Well, we were playing the Orlando Predators, and Jay Gruden was the quarterback, who's obviously a legend of arena football and had great success in the NFL as well as a coach. I remember it was the Pepsi Arena back then, and it was sold out. Now, we drew well, but we didn't often have sellouts. And in Albany, we were the biggest fish in town. Like, we didn't have, a Major League Baseball team. We didn't have an NFL team or an NBA team. So I guess what I remember the most about it was so loud in there, Trey, that when I listened to the recording of my broadcast, you couldn't even hear anything. The noise, we just weren't prepared for how much noise was in the building. So unfortunately, I never really got to relive the experience of my own cassette. I've obviously watched the TV copy of it, but my radio call of it, you couldn't even hear it because it was so loud there. And one of the things I most remember is I was pretty stressed out because I couldn't control anything on the field. And I desperately wanted us to win because, I just felt like these people embraced me. They made me feel a part of everything. I mean, if they had like a team dinner, I got invited. If there was like a team bowling night, I got invited. So it was the intimacy. I felt so connected to all the people. I mean, one of my all-time favorite people is Kyle Moore Brown. He was our starting center. And every time any one of us sees each other, it's a bear hug like no other. So being there for that championship, seeing that city just be so proud of the team and so excited for what they had just accomplished. And, I've some lifelong friends out of it. And Mike Daly is still somebody who I admire, who probably had, outside of family, the greatest influence on me on how I behave as a man, as a person, how I treat people, what integrity means. I mean, Mike Daly used to just pound us with integrity is doing the right thing when no one's watching. And I tell that to my kids today. So while it was a ton of fun, the games were exciting. I still can't believe that John Crick, our fullback, caught a touchdown pass to seal the victory at the end of the game. Yeah. He did not have what I'd call great hands, but he had good enough hands when it counted. It was a legendary team. And Mike Pulowski, our leader, he was like a Nordic Viking. I mean, he just had this toughness to him. And he was the perfect quarterback to have for Eddie Brown because, Eddie Brown, and I love Eddie in case you see this, he's sort of like the ultimate wide receiver diva. He was open on every play. So someone had to manage Eddie, and Mike had the personality to be like, Eddie, not right now. And look, he threw it to Eddie a lot of the time because Eddie was the best player in the league. But just
Yeah,
the
why wouldn't you?
cast of
Yeah.
characters and the intimacy. And look, like winning is hard at any level. So being a part of a championship, I mean, I have that championship ring just in my office here at my place. And,
Yeah.
being a part of something special like that stays with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I think what you touched on with Albany and the Firebirds being the gig in town, I think that's just so important in the landscape of indoor and arena football, where a lot of times you see teams try to carve out a niche in a crowded marketplace, but a team like Albany, a team like Fishers, like you see these teams in these smaller markets where you are the gig in town. Like you don't have to compete. I think that's just so interesting to see over the years, and Albany being that prime example of it.
Well, because in Albany, what you have now is you have multi-generation fans of arena
Yeah,
football. And that's something that I think when you're bringing a new franchise to a league, I'm going to cite the IFL here, next year, you're going to have
yeah,
Athens and you're going to have Austin. How important it is, because you could be setting the tone where a dad and a mom are taking their kids now, and then a generation later, those kids are taking their kids.
oh
And
yeah,
that's something they've been able to do in Albany, which has not been replicated in lots of markets. So I do think market size is important, but how the fans feel connected to the team, because Phoenix is a big market, but I feel like Rattlers fans feel connected to the team. They do a
right,
really good
yeah,
job of connecting the players and the coaches, and you see it in the loyalty of their fan base. I mean, a lot of their fans were fans of the Arena Football League when I got started. I mean, they've always been one of
yeah.
the crown jewels of indoor football. So making that connection, that's what it's all about. So that generation after generation keeps going. And look, there are markets in all the different indoor football leagues that I think have some of those ingredients, but Albany was particularly unique. It was a city that was starving for success. It wanted something that was a badge of honor that they could call their own, and they could say
Yeah.
that they were the world champions of arena football in 1999. I think anybody who was there at that time, it's something that will be some of the most cherished memories of their careers.
Yeah, speaking on Arizona, like went to a Rattlers game earlier this year, and walking through the arena and seeing the Hunky Cooper jerseys, seeing the Calvin Schexnayder jersey, I was like, "This is incredible."
I mean, the
Like this is
Rattlers
like you
really
said,
put together, right? It's like they could have
yeah,
their own Hall of Fame, and it's
oh,
just so
one
many
thousand
guys. And
percent.
obviously, you know how much I love Sed Bonner, but there were
Oh
so
yeah,
many other guys. I mean, one of the coolest moments, I had a game there recently. Nick Davila was there, and we didn't know he
yeah,
was there, and he only came up after the game. And there I'm sitting there with Nick and Sed, right? Not only are they great quarterbacks, two of the classiest, greatest leaders I've been around, both guys winners.
yeah,
And then I sort of stepped away and watched the two of them interact. It was awesome. Just seeing
yeah,
the mutual respect and the admiration, so genuine. It was almost like Sid was the big brother and Nick was the younger brother who was following in his footsteps. And that
yeah,
mantle of being, because I tell people all the time, being QB1 is different than any job in sports anywhere in the world. I love all
right,
the sports, but there's no job that's more important than QB1. So that person has to be a lot more than a great football player. He has to be a great leader. He has to be somebody who can represent your franchise in the community and be an ambassador for your franchise. And so those were two of the best. But boy, those teams were loaded. And one name I can't leave out there, Randy Gatewood. Randy Gatewood, one
oh
of the all-time
yes,
Ironmen of all time, and as good a guy
yeah.
as you'll ever meet. I did games with him for years in the Arena League after his career. Absolutely love Randy. But that team was always loaded with superstars. I can tell you
It's
this, they always
unbelievable.
knew how to
Yeah.
recruit in Phoenix. They got the talent, that's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, backing it up just a bit, you touched on going to USC for broadcast journalism. What age did you know that you wanted to get into the world of sports broadcasting?
Well, there weren't nearly as many outlets to be a sports broadcaster or a sports commentator. So it sort of
Yeah.
seemed too big to even consider. I'm originally from Philadelphia. So I was
Uh-huh.
really fortunate. Merrill Reese, who's still the voice of the Eagles in his 80s, was on the radio. And then we had Harry Callis, who's one of the ultimate legends doing the Phillies game. So those guys were the soundtrack of my childhood. So they
Yeah.
were like sort of larger than life figures. I mean, you didn't often see them on TV because all the football games were all televised, but we would often be in the car and I heard these guys and their voices, and you just felt the whole picture of what was happening there through their voices. So let's fast forward. I graduated from Emory University, and I think I'm leaning at that time that I want to become a high school history poli-sci teacher and be a coach. I wanted to coach both
Okay.
soccer and tennis. So that's really what I was going to do. I was good, already had been admitted to NYU and Columbia to get my master's in education. And then I was going to
Wow.
become a coach. And my mom and I had this fateful dinner. She lives in Madison, Wisconsin. I can still remember where we were. And she's like, if you could do anything in the world and you weren't worried about the money or what your future would look like, would you have stability? She said, what would you do? And I said, I'd be a radio play-by-play announcer. I said, that's got to be the coolest gig in the world.
Yeah.
She says to me, I think I was 22 at the time. She said, well, you could become a teacher at 35. Why don't you take a run at this and see how it goes? So while I had already been admitted to these other schools, at the last minute, I applied to a few different graduate schools. USC, when I went for my visit, when I found I'd been admitted, just the timing again, it was a serendipitous moment. So I get to campus, I do a visit. Turns out Fox Sports, like big Fox Sports, NFL Fox Sports, was looking for people that were in the program to work on NFL Sundays. So they asked if I would extend my visit for a day. So I extended it for a day. I drive over to Fox Sports. I interview and I land the gig. So when I actually come back a couple months later to start school, starting from week 1 of the NFL season, I was logging highlights that would be used during halftime that you'd hear Terry Bradshaw voice. But I was in the building with like all the big wigs at Fox. And so it just made total sense to me. I'm like, I got to go to USC because I got a chance to work at Fox Sports. Whatever other schools I was considering it, and University of Wisconsin was high on my list. Not only was I in there, I was going to travel with the Badgers radio announcers. Even on the road, I was going to be kind of like a gopher for them. But I was like, boy, this is the NFL. This is Fox Sports. Like, I may never get a chance to touch this level. So I changed my mind. And instead, I went to Los Angeles and, I worked at Fox Sports for years, which then when I became a broadcaster helped out. They helped me get an NFL Europe gig. Once I had that tape, it led to lots of different things. But I guess the life lessons, because I talk to lots of young people who want to be broadcasters, is there's going to be a lot of different paths to get to where you want to go. And there'll be some key decisions along the way, but some of those decisions will happen for you. And for me, I just got so lucky that the day I visited USC, the next day they were looking for people to work at Fox Sports. And it completely changed my career. Another crazy one like that is, the Philadelphia Soul came into existence. There was no arena team in Philadelphia, but I was from Philadelphia. I had worked for the Firebirds for years. So I was sort of the perfect candidate for them. I was a Philly guy. And all of a sudden now I'm working with Ron Jaworski, the next year, I'm calling Philadelphia Eagles preseason games, sitting next to the quarterback I grew up watching. So there are all these little moments in a career like this where you're like, wow, I got lucky here. I was just in the right place at the right time. But there are all these moments. Just know that it's not like becoming, I tell people, like a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant. You got to be ready. There's going to be some twists and turns, and you may be in some markets you think, well, I don't want to be in Albany, New York. Albany ended up being 4 of the best years of my life. I spent 3 years in Indianapolis, bunch of years in Philadelphia with the Soul. The only location I didn't love, I didn't have the best time at the University of Louisville, just because the egos of Bobby Petrino and Rick Pitino, the two of them together, and I hosted both coaches' shows.
A lot.
Look, I like them both personally. Let's just say it wasn't as much fun as the other stops along the way.
Yeah, no kidding. I can only imagine. Well, you touched on the move to Indianapolis with the Firebirds. Tell me what that was like being within the franchise during that move, and what some of the differences between the Albany and Indianapolis were.
It was an interesting situation because I didn't really make very much money. So, making the move seemed ambitious at the time, but he's passed. Joe Hennessy was one of the great leaders of the Albany Firebirds that they ever had. And then he got all of us to buy in. Well, he was going to Indiana and he said, I want you to come with me. And that's really all I needed to hear. So we get to Indiana and it already was immediately different because we had a coach's show that was actually at like a local restaurant bar. Players would come out, members of the dance team would come out, and they really wanted to use me as an ambassador to connect with the locals because they were all new to arena football. And that I liked that role. I immediately knew, I said, look, I actually have this like reservoir of knowledge about something that not many people know about. So I took that to Indianapolis and we really drew well there. I mean, I'm not surprised at all that Fishers does well because the fans in Indiana really embraced indoor football. And our time there with the Firebirds, look, we were coming off winning a championship in 99, and this was just 2 seasons later. We're in Indiana, and we had some epic games. We never got back to a title game, but Raymond Filial was our quarterback, one of my all-time favorite guys. He had a season where he had 68 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions. I mean, just mind-boggling numbers. But they're one of the cool things that happened to me. Again, we're going to go back to the hustle and a little bit of luck. This will date me. In 2001, as a result of 9/11, Don Fisher, the legendary voice of Indiana football and basketball. They had now scheduled a football game on the same day as a basketball game. So unfortunately, Don couldn't be in two places at once. Well, Learfield Radio had been amongst all these places I had sent my tapes to. Well, they reach out to me and they're like, can you call an Indiana basketball game? Can you do an IU game? So we went to Carbondale, Illinois. We flew on like a little private jet. I was with like the other people who worked in the sports information department. And lo and behold, they come out in the candy stripe pants. And this is like mind blowing. I'm doing like an Indiana basketball game. We ended up losing on a jumper at the buzzer. I never called another IU game. I'm 0-1 lifetime, but just another one of those, like, you just can't believe that you're sitting here calling this game for IU basketball. And I'm very grateful to Don Fisher, who helped me a lot. And I still consider him, one of the guys who really helped me during my time in Indianapolis. But the Indianapolis thing, again, this is going to lead. There's a theme I got running here. We worked the Firebirds with the Indiana Pacers. They used some of their sales and marketing people helped us out because we shared Conseco Fieldhouse. Well, I become such good friends with the production guys. The very last game of an NBA season, I asked if I could just record myself doing a TV broadcast while they were doing the actual broadcast. And they said yes. So I called, at the time, the New Jersey Nets at the Indiana Pacers. I had the feed from the producer, and I just called the game. Rob Blackman, who's now the voice of Purdue University, who did a bunch of Firebird games with me, he was my analyst for the demo tape. The reason I tell this story is, fast forward a year or two later, the Louisville job to do football and basketball had come up, and I'd never done basketball on TV, but I had this TV tape of me calling the Pacers and the Nets, and that helped me land the Louisville gig, which was instrumental in my career. 2005 was sort of the start of that fall season. Everything came together. I got the Eagles preseason game and Louisville football and basketball all at the same time.
Yeah, and you were doing the soul in the spring. I was like, oh man, you're doing everything all at once.
So I would spend from as soon as the arena season was over, I would go to Louisville. So I'd be there from most of training camp for football through the basketball season, and then I would drive my car and be back in Philly for the other 5 months of the year. And I did that for several years, and I guess it sounds crazy now, but I never had more stuff than could fit in a small U-Haul trailer. Like I had to rent furniture everywhere because I always had to be ready to bounce to the next place. I always told people I had one foot in the door and 1 foot out the door, just because, I knew I aspired. I didn't know what it was going to look like, my career. I just knew that I was hungry and I wanted more. And I wasn't sure that those places were going to provide that opportunity. Because again, if you're in a city like Philadelphia, if you're not the voice of the Eagles, the Sixers, the Phillies, what other gigs are there? I really found, having been in Los Angeles, so much content is created here. I mean, I got to work at the NFL Network for 12 years. So I moved here without a job. It was the fall of 2008. And I just decided no one was going to hire me and move me to Los Angeles. So I decided I had a gap. If you'll recall, in 2009, the Arena League went dark.
Yeah.
My plan was to go, because I just didn't want to be in Louisville anymore. So my plan, I came here for 5 months. Got a fully furnished place. It was just me, my dog, my clothes, my car, my computer. Drove across the country from Philadelphia to LA. And it's crazy to tell you, I live in the exact same place 18 years later. I ended up buying the place after being here because there was no reason to go back to Philly because the league went dark.
Yeah.
Had the league played in 2009, I would not be living here. I probably wouldn't know my wife. My kids wouldn't exist.
Wow.
The fact that the league went dark, which broke my heart at the time. I mean, I'm talking real devastation. I mean, I was going to be on ESPN doing multiple games on big ESPN, not like where you buy the time, and everything was set up from the Arena League. So when the league went dark that year, it really did crush me, but it ended up keeping me in Los Angeles, and lots of good things happened after that.
Wow. No kidding. Wow. The domino effect is crazy. Right? It's crazy. Well, but before we dive into Philadelphia, you mentioned NFL Europe. What did you do over there?
I did play-by-play, so I did a total of 5 seasons of NFL Europe, and the mindset of the players there is very similar to the players that we follow today. They're guys who, for whatever reason, didn't get much of a look at the highest level. They were guys that were very easy to root for. So what they do is they'd send us over for 3 weeks. You do 3 games. So you'd be based in whatever city made the most sense. I think 1 year I was based in Barcelona, 2 years in Amsterdam, and then the last years I actually called it from NFL Films in New Jersey. But being over there is the best boondoggle ever. Like, they didn't pay us that much for the games, but the game would end on Saturday night, and the next thing I had to do would be the following Thursday. So I'd be in Europe with free time to go, explore and bounce around and see things and travel.
No
But the
kidding.
games
Wow.
themselves were great because we got a ton of access with the players and coaches. And I just love that everyone felt hungry. I felt like I was one of them, right? I was
Yeah.
at that same place in my career and I wanted more just like they did. And so I just found myself cheering for all these guys. And some of the guys, obviously, the bigger name guys went on to big time careers in the NFL. But there were countless other guys who, maybe were great college players and great NFL Europe players, but, maybe just didn't have enough talent. But the games were fun. I met all kinds of cool analysts that I've worked with over the years there. In fact, the final 2 years at NFL Films in New Jersey, I got to work with Mike Mayock. And that was a huge moment because not only do I respect Mike Mayock's knowledge, we became really good friends. I mean, he's a Philly guy. I'm a Philly guy. And our chemistry was so good that the Minnesota Vikings ended up hiring us together as a play-by-play analyst combination for the Vikings preseason. So NFL Europe kind of indirectly led to me doing the Vikings games for 5 years with Mike, which was great because his insider knowledge of all things, because he thought like a GM. It was just next level football. And for a football junkie like me, who doesn't want to hang out with a guy who knows more than me. So learning from Mike Mayock was one of the best parts of NFL Europe. And just being at NFL Films for those games, just being in that building was pretty cool.
Yeah. What was the, like, I'm sure you've done this over the years, like being in the building for the game versus being remote. Like, is it more difficult being remote? It seems like it would be.
Well, there are pluses and minuses, and sometimes people are surprised at the pluses. I'll say the minuses is you don't really get to connect with somebody. You don't. It's not like seeing a coach in person. I always tell people I've done college football for 25 years. You're looking at what I call the bond. Whereas your first in-person meeting, I expect the guy to be a little bit, I don't know this guy. Let me get to know him.
Right.
I had a package 2 years ago on TNT Sports. It was me and my buddy Darius Walker, and we had 5 San Jose State games. And I think it was like our third game, and the coaches just told us so much more. They really shared a lot. I was like, we made the bond. Like that's what you're going for, where they trust you as a football person and they trust you as a journalist, that if they tell you something that's off the record, it stays off the record. So those are the real minuses. You don't get to know the players. You don't get FaceTime with anybody. But the plus is this, and this is sometimes hard for people who don't work in TV to understand. When we're doing a game, I could be sitting in an arena and I might see something happening on the bench, but we don't have a shot of it. So I start talking about it, but we don't have someone who can get a shot of it. And there's a little bit of a disconnect, at least to like people who like really follow what sports commentary looks like. Well, when you're doing a game remotely, you can only see what's on the screen. So there's never a disconnect. In that sense, it's much easier. You're never distracted by something happening off to the side because whatever's on the screen is all you're seeing. So I think in that sense, it's simplified things. You just focus. Now, look, there were times where they wouldn't have a shot and you're remote. And I did NFL preseason games remotely from NFL Network that were a complete disaster. I mean, Kurt Warner and I literally were like bordering on like tears, thought we were going to be made a mockery of. Because we had the feed of one of the teams and not the other. And there was a serious injury to a player on the other team that we basically ignored because we didn't control the feed. And we got crushed for it. I mean, we only did a couple of the games, but it hurt me. It hurt me deeply because I felt so bad that we didn't like acknowledge the injury. It just looked like we were callous and indifferent to it, but we just didn't have the feed. So most of it, you prefer to be there, but there are times that, look, I've worked at the Tennis Channel for 10 years. It is truly a global sport. If I had to go to every place that they play,
there's no way.
My kids wouldn't even know what I look like.
Yeah,
I go to Santa Monica where our studios are, like I did this morning, and I call matches in Germany and England, and I come right home and they didn't even miss me because they were at camp today. So remote thing has its positives, but to me, football is the one that you most want to be there to build those bridges with the coaches and the players and the staff and the fans. Because you're that voice that they hear. And there's no sport that I work in where I get more gratitude than working in indoor football. Those fans feel connected to me in a way that no other sport I've ever worked. I don't have somebody who's a big tennis fan stop me in the grocery store to tell me how much they love my commentary. That doesn't ever happen. But if it's a fan of indoor football or someone who loved the Arena League when I was doing it, or someone now who loves the Indoor Football League, they feel connected to you in a way. And again, I keep coming back to it, the intimacy thing, the size of the rosters, the size of the team, the fact that the players and coaches can really touch and speak to all the fans, I think is something that, I think makes it really special.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you mentioned Philadelphia getting to go over there when they were an expansion team and starting out. What was it like kind of getting in on the ground floor of that and, the rise over the years to that championship title a few years in?
Well, the beginning was super frustrating because myself and Darren Kinney had been a championship caliber player for the San Jose SaberCats. He was a great center. He actually retired to be my analyst for Philadelphia Soul, local TV and local radio. Well, between the two of us, we knew a lot more than anyone in the organization knew about arena football. And that at times was really frustrating. They hired a guy, Michael Trigg, who, I wish him well. He wasn't a good fit in Philadelphia. He was the wrong guy for the job. And I remember after the first season, I was feeling a little bit more comfortable, and Ron Jaworski and I were having a beer at some postseason event. And he was sort of like, well, what do you think we should do? He's like, we don't want to look like one of those organizations where you're going to like fire a guy after one season. I said, well, are you ever going to win a ring with this guy? Because you're not going to. I know that he won in Grand Rapids, but this is just it's the wrong fit.
Yeah.
So I said, I think you should let him go. I think you'd be better off with a fresh start. Well, Ron's like, I don't think we're going to do that. I'm like, well, I don't want to be right about this, but mid-season, you're going to fire this guy and you're going to waste the year 2. Well, 5 games in, the Soul were 3-2. Wasn't like they had a losing record, but they were like, this guy's the wrong guy. So they fired Trigg, and James Fuller, who I'm still friends with today, who's still out there coaching in the IFL. He became the interim head coach, which was great because I love Fuller. He's a great guy. And it wasn't until the next season when they hired this guy, Brett Muncy. And I thought, who's Brett Muncy? Well, it turned out he'd been an assistant in Orlando. He really sounded like the Gruden brothers, like his cadence, the way he delivered. And what he did with that team, it went from a team that wasn't very good after 2 years to being a playoff team year 3. And by year 5, winning the title. I will take a little bit more credit than I've ever gotten because I personally recruited Tony Graziani, and then I personally recruited Chris Jackson because the people who didn't know who these people were. Greg Hopkins was playing for the Avengers. I would go out there during training camp and hang out, and I loved Tony Graziani. We became friends, and I said, look, Tony, they're going to pay you more in Philly, and your name's Tony Graziani. We play in South Philly. I'm like, this is a match made in heaven.
You're the most Philly guy possible.
Yeah, the most Philly guy ever who's not from Philly. So he comes and he delivered. Chris Jackson was just an absolute superstar. It took a little more convincing, I think, for him to come to Philadelphia. But the interesting twist in it all that it ended up being Matt DeRazio, who led them to a title and a 13-3 record because the championship year of 2008, Graz was hurt for most of the season. He didn't play very much. And DeRazio, like the most humble guy, I feel like he doesn't get any credit from that championship. Everyone thinks the team was just so good that they won, not because of him. Let me tell you, we won because of Matt DeRazio. What a great leader. What a great guy. I mean, Matt DeRazio, if you had a daughter and you're like, my daughter needs to date someone, Matt's your guy. I mean, just salt of the earth, just humble, quiet, reserved. So the time in Philly was amazing because it was only after about 2 years they were like, oh, it turns out Ari really does know what he's talking about, even though he's just a radio and TV guy. So then once Muncy was there, it changed. All of a sudden, Muncy, like Coach Daly had done, invited me to everything. When we went to Dave & Buster's, I think, every week on Wednesdays. I did everything with the team. That group was super tight. And there was a time period where John Bon Jovi was pretty focused on us, and he treated us like royalty. I mean, we went to one of his concerts at Madison Square Garden, and we were all in a section together, and he gave the team a shout out, which was pretty heady stuff for like an arena football team. So, between Ron Jaworski and John Bon Jovi, we had a lot of star power. It was a time of my life that I cherish. I mean, I'm back in my original hometown of Philadelphia, and it was just so much fun to have won rings. Well, I didn't get a ring, but that's a story for another time. But between Albany and Philadelphia, I really felt prepared that, I really was becoming a national guy. After that, I've never worked for a team since then in arena football or in the indoor football league. But being in those two places at the right time, I think it's prepared me for the work I'm doing today because I have so much history. I was a part of 2 really significant franchises in the history of our sport. And I got to just learn a lot from really good people, because Coach Daly taught us care so much about arena football that they're like, what's up with that guy? What's the deal with that guy? Because I think sometimes those players were sensitive if someone said, hey, is this semi-pro ball? And I said, if you want to get on the wrong side of an arena player, ask them if it's semi-pro. Because I would contend, even if you make $1, you're a pro, right? You only get paid if you're a pro. Semi-pro, you don't get paid. So just being a part of it, I learned a lot of important life lessons at those times. I'll tell this story. It doesn't make me look good, but it's a good tool that I want people to learn. It was the end of our second season in Philadelphia. And I was doing the post-game show by myself. And it was a bad year. We didn't have a good year. So I decided to start talking about who should remain on the roster and where there needed to be improvements on the roster.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, no is right. So Chris Ryan was our starting fullback who had great success in Grand Rapids. And I just didn't think at the time that he was good enough to remain the starter at fullback. So there was nothing, I wasn't angry when I said it. I wasn't emotional. I was just going through almost like an accountant would. Oh, we can get a little better here. We can get a little better there.
Right.
So fast forward, we're getting on the bus and I see Chris and he says, my mama told me what you said. And it broke my heart on the spot. I thought, you know what? If I'm ever going to comment on roster improvement, I have to be more selective in the words I choose. Because you could say the same thing, Trey, 1,000 different ways. You can say a team got out-coached, which will get you lots of enemies, or you can just say today wasn't their day. And in that case with Chris, I could have said it differently. I could have phrased it in a way that didn't hurt his feelings or his family's feelings. But ever since that day, I learned that how you phrase things and how you treat these people, because they're real human beings underneath that helmet, underneath the pads and the jersey, they're just like everybody else. They have feelings. And the guys who tell you that they don't listen to the outside noise, they're fooling you. They hear it. They all hear it. We're all human. And so I just think that was one of the most important lessons for me to learn in terms of how I would talk about players and coaches moving forward, to be sensitive to the fact that they are human beings and you don't want to upset their kids or their siblings or their parents. And so that, I remember walking on the bus that day with Chris was one of the most valuable lessons I've learned as a broadcaster.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Well, around that same time in that era, you had the Wolf's Den on YouTube. Got the bring back the Wolf's Den here. Tell me about how that kind of came about, because that was like an official league thing that you were doing, right?
Yeah, I did it through the league, and the internet was a different time then in 2008.
Yeah.
So my buddy Mike Fox, who was our video coordinator for the Soul, still one of my best friends to this day. He's my spotter when I do the Chiefs preseason. We're still tight. They wanted to get something online that gave people kind of an appreciation for what had just happened the last week in the league, and then to fast forward. And then we always did like a final thing that was like this day in Arena Football League history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was just, we'd go to the facility. In fact, it's kind of funny. Like there are a couple of shots where like my dog's running in the shot on our practice field. But what it came from is I had so much knowledge about the league, but really no way to share it with everybody. And through what means, it was technology was just different then. So that's how it came to be. We would just, there was no teleprompter. There was nothing. I just would do it in one take, whatever it was. Then I would send it to the league, and then they added, the wolf howling at the beginning, and they added some music, and they edited it. And lo and behold, the Wolf's Den was born. And you're going to love this. So at the end of the 2008 season, a guy from ESPN reached out to me and he said, we're looking to add someone who has real arena experience in the playoffs this year. He's like, we have all these guys like Ray Bentley and other guys who've done other things who have a connection, but we really want someone who's like an arena guy.
Yeah.
We had a couple conversations and I ultimately got the gig. And he said, you know what got you the gig? You know what sealed the deal? He said, the Wolf's Den. He's like, I watched the Wolf's Den. I said, this is my guy. And I thought, here's another thing where it's just a little bit of hustle. I was doing something that I didn't get paid to do it. Though I will tell you this, by the end of the year, we got a sponsor. We were sponsored by Miller Lite, which looked really cool. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I never got a single beer out of it, but it was pretty cool that it was up there on the thing that it was sponsored.
Yeah.
Having a beer company sponsored. Again, a lot of those things might have come back, Trey, but we didn't play in 2009. So a lot of things that had just happened for me late in 2008 all went away, which, added to the heartbreak.
Yeah. Hard stop there for 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Hard stop. That's the way of putting it.
Well, when did you start doing the sideline reporting? Was that like in the AFL 2.0 when you kind of got in the mix?
Yeah, so when we came back in 2010, it was actually Anthony Herron. Anthony Herron and I met doing Big Ten Network. We both had the arena background. I love Anthony. He's doing IFL games now, one of my favorite guys. So he said, look, I think they're going to use NFL Network as the primary Friday night place to do the games. That's going to be the national carrier. Well, interestingly enough, Mike Mayock was working at NFL Network. So I went to Mike Mayock and pitched myself for NFL Network that I could do whatever else they wanted me to do, but I could also do the games. Well, it ended up working out. They're like, so in my deal, it was, I would do news updates, but then I would also do arena games. So we had the Friday night game. And so they were using their like main announcers to do the play-by-play. I think Fran Charles did some games, Paul Burmeister did some games, and I was on the sideline. And look, I knew everybody in the league, so I felt super comfortable down there. I tell people there's no place at a football stadium I feel more comfortable than down on the field because that's where the action's happening. Well, it turns out people like, I call it guerrilla style sideline reporting, where I'm in the bench. I mean, guys are sweating on me. You're in the mix. You're out on the field. Well, people took a shine to it. But then interestingly enough, some of the play-by-play guys for the NFL had other stuff to do. So I think the last 2 years, I actually did play-by-play for the Arena Bowls when they were on NFL Network. I think it was a 3-year deal. And so then when it left, Jerry Kurz, I remember I was living in LA, Jerry flew Anthony and Sid here, and we all went to lunch. And he said, I want to make you three my A team for the Arena League. Wherever our games air, you're going to work for the league. And then, how you guys divvy up the duties, it made more sense for me to do play-by-play. And so either Sid or Anthony would be on the sideline.
Right.
So then fast forward a few more years, CBS Sports Network got involved. They had Brent Stover, who I absolutely love and cherish my relationship with him. So then they had me back on the sideline. So whereas most people would say, you'd rather be in the booth, I don't know. Like being down on the field, you feel so connected to the game. I mean, I'm down there like trying to pick people's spirits up. A guy has a fumble, he comes over. I'm tapping him on the helmet. I don't know if that's professional. Is that the right or the wrong thing to do? That's just the way I did it.
Right.
So I liked being down there. So when, fast forward to last offseason, when Brent called and they were trying to put together what they wanted to have their A team for the IFL, he said, you're my first call. Like, I realized we both did the same job, but would you be open to doing the sideline? And I said, yeah, I love being down there. So I've actually, interesting enough, I've only done a few. The plan was for me to do a ton of sideline, but it's just worked out that I've actually been in the booth more than the sideline. But I love being down there. I love the interaction with the coaches. In fact, Mike Davis in Vegas, he just, the interaction, he's busting on me, tell me, if I'm doing hits that I look bored down there. Like, you don't get that. Or Kevin Guy back in the day, I'd be getting play calls from him. If the play worked out, I'd get knuckles. If the play didn't work out, he'd be like, Ari, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So
it's your fault. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my fault. And I just like on the field. So, I don't know what it's going to look like moving forward. But I think I'll probably be in the booth more. But I know I've got at least one more sideline game coming up on July 12th. And so, I had never seen someone do sideline the way that I did it, but I just did it because I was so comfortable down there. And I felt like I could talk to people in the middle of a game where I think most of the time people would probably be like, well, I don't want to bother him or I don't want to interrupt him in his train of thought. I've had some of our sideline reporters this year be like, well, I didn't want to interrupt him because the quarterback was talking to the OC. I was like, no, don't worry about it. Like, how we present the game is more important than whatever they're talking about. So if you need to talk to the quarterback, you can just go ahead and interrupt. So I think it was all the background in Albany and Philly made me feel comfortable to do sideline reporting for Arena a little bit different than anybody else had ever done it.
Yeah. And like pregame, do you have some briefing conversations with coaches? Like, hey, coach, I'm gonna be on your left here for like, how does that work? And do you have folks that are be like, no, I'm out. Like, I don't want to. I need to focus.
Yeah, I've had guys try to do that. I don't take no for an answer because I always remind them and say, look, I'm only here to make you look good. I'm not going to have any gotcha questions. I'm going to just ask you what happened on the play or what did you like here? I mean, if you put a combination of all my sideline hits I've ever done, there's not a single gotcha question in there. I'll often even tell the guy what I'm going to ask him so he can give it a thought before he answers it. I mean, all you want to do is have that person as relaxed as they can possibly be. But the big deal is if it's a team I haven't done and I don't know the staff, then I really do have like a protocol where I will go down to the coaches and let them know, look, you're going to see a lot of me down here. If you're not doing something of the utmost importance, I need you to be available because I'm trying to do something down here that's not normally done. And that's bring the fans into the game down on the field. So when I was coaching some of our new sideline reporters up, it would be, you got to know like where the coach is going to head when the interview is over so that they never have to cross the camera. I would ask the coaches to tell all their players that if this guy asks you to do something, that you do it right away. Obviously, if you got to be back, you just scored a touchdown, but you're on special teams, he can't do it. But if the guy scores a touchdown, he's not on special teams, that they know that the sideline reporter is the priority. So that's something I'll even talk about on production calls on a Thursday or a Friday with the coach. Hey, a reminder, I'm going to be down on the sideline. Make sure your guys know if I want them, they got to make themselves available. So there is a process. And once you've done a team once, the guys get used to having you down there. You'd be surprised because they feel comfortable with you. They're coming off the field, they score, and guys are dapping you, giving you high fives. I got in trouble only once. I think I was on the field. doing a CBS game and the Soul were playing in Philly. I didn't know the camera was on me, and like the half came to an end, and maybe the Soul had scored like a field goal. I was like high-fiving a bunch of people, and it was on camera. I remember Anthony Harris like, "Come on, man! Like that's not a good look." And I'm like, well, "Nobody told me I was on camera. I had my back to the camera."
Yeah.
But yeah, sort of being down there and just letting guys know what to expect. I think that whenever you work with people in a setting where you're going to be interviewing them, the best way to make them relax is to let them know what's going to happen, so that there's nothing unexpected. Because I think all of us get a little uneasy with unknowns. Like, I know with you today, you're not going to ask me something that I don't know the answer to, right? This is easy. But if I just think that some players who maybe haven't had a lot of media exposure, to get them to relax and show their true personality. I mean, I'm still coaching guys up on how to do those interviews today. I mean, I remember the first game that I had with Kyle Moore Brown. I realized he's no longer the coach in New Mexico, but I said, the way you talk to me is different than when I see you interviewed by somebody else. I said, you got to act like you're talking to someone you're comfortable with, because they want to see you in command. They want to see you showing off your true personality. So, if I interview a guy and I can sense that he's tight, when we're done, I'll be like, hey, you got this. I'm going to be coming back to you, and I want you to just relax and be yourself. And you'd be amazed how giving somebody just a little lift in that moment brings out the best of them the next time you put them on camera.
Yeah, and it's also, you guys aren't really putting microphones in faces after something catastrophic happens either. Like, it's usually after like, hey, amazing touchdown over the wall. Tell me about it. And they're excited to talk about their touchdown they scored. So
absolutely, there are the tougher ones is, well, let's say whoever coach is trailing in the game, when you talk to him before the start of the third quarter, oftentimes they're not in the best mood, especially if
makes
blown
sense.
out. But I've often suggested sometimes it doesn't even need to be on camera. I can summarize it. If he's particularly sour, I can be like, Coach, give me the nuggets that, famously, like Andy Reid with our sideline person for the preseason, until last year when they mandated coaches talking to sideline reporters, Andy would just be like, I'm not doing it. But I think that what we learned is Andy'd be happy to talk to our sideline person off camera, and then that person could summarize the person's message. So you want to, in a perfect world, you want everybody on camera and you want everyone smiling and feeling good. But I think that you really do earn your stripes when there's those tough, challenging moments. Like, for instance, I've been down there when there's been serious injuries and you have to talk to guys that are upset. I think that how you handle those delicate moments and just try to show that you're a human being that cares about them and realize this is a tough moment for them, I think you'll end up getting great responses.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you were in the arena style for so long, and this year in the IFL, it's the indoor style. It's like, from a commentary perspective or from just a ball, enjoyment perspective, what's this year been like with the new indoor football style rules?
It's been eye-opening for me in many ways. First of all, I've had to learn a lot. There are significant rule differences.
Yeah.
What I find is this is really a mirror of how much of college football is played. A lot of the rules are very similar. The fact that the defenses can do so much more makes it, from a scheme point of view, a more interesting game than arena football to me. I like the fact that the defenses can do more. You don't know if they're bringing that extra guy with pressure. There was no blitzing in the Arena League. So from a football junkie point of view, I prefer this. Now, I was also used to, you expected to score a touchdown on every drive. I mean, if you went 7 for 8, people would be pissed. Like, why didn't you score all 8 times you had the ball?
Yeah.
But Coach Riggs and I actually had a moment where I was judging the quarterback play. I think it was Quad City at Vegas.
I remember
Vegas
this.
Was up, but, I was down there, and Jaden Delore wasn't happy with how he was playing. DeQuan Neal wasn't happy with how we were playing. Well, anyway, I saw Jared Widman, our president, at halftime, and I was like, boy, these quarterbacks, they're not happy with how their play. The play callers are frustrated. So Jared's like, well, then go on camera and tell them that. Nobody else would be able to say that. So I went on and I told everybody what I thought. I said, look, like, the quarterback play has not been good enough. Well, Danny Cannell, who was with Coach Riggs in the booth, thought I was a tough grader. They thought I was a little hard on him. And it made me think more about it afterwards. And what I realized I had to do was stop measuring quarterback stats and quarterback play from the Arena Football League with the Indoor Football League. That they're completely different in that. Since you expected a quarterback in the Arena Football League to go 23 for 28 for 289 yards and 7 touchdowns and no picks, and that was a day at the office. This is a different game. This is more of a dual threat quarterback game, though Nate Davis being one of the obvious exceptions to that. They're doing great. But so from a scheme point of view, I had a lot to learn. There are things about the arena game that I really miss. But I do prefer the IFL from a defensive point of view, that, the way you view possessions and time management. I do think the Arena League, those coaches were at least a little bit more schooled in how to manage the final minute of a half and the final minute of a fourth quarter, Kevin Guy being an obvious exception to that rule.
Right.
So some of those things are different. And, I do miss the nets, because I think that the kickoffs were more interesting when you had a player turn his back to the guys coming to get him. And depending on the tightness of the nets, who knows what can happen? You had all kinds of bar balls would pop off the bar and it'd land at the 10-yard line. So I often say, in a perfect world, if you could marry the defensive rules from the Indoor Football League, but bring the nets, that to me would sort of be the ultimate hybrid sport. Because, the squib kicks, I don't love so much. I do love the deuce. We didn't have the deuce. The deuce is fantastic.
Yeah.
The deuce is good. You can just have that. But the bar balls, there was a kicker. I think he was mainly with the Storm, Mike Black. It was like he was hitting a perfect sandwich every time. Almost every time he kicked off, you thought, that ball is going to hit the bar. It's going to come back out and play. So it added an extra level of drama. So from the overall perspective, I'm incredibly impressed with the Indoor Football League, the way they're presenting their sport. I believe that the fields look amazing. The way the boards all look universally the same from arena to arena. The presentation in the Arena League, you'd have teams that put a lot of resources into it, then you'd have ones that wouldn't really. This league at least has, it has a common denominator, that there's a threshold you have to meet in terms of the presentation of the sport. I've been really pleased with that. And I've been so pleased that the coaches and the players have welcomed the newbies like me and Sid, and treated us like a part of it from day one. And for me, selfishly, so many of the coaches are guys who played in the Arena Football League. So it's like a reunion every week out on the field before the game. So I prefer the sport of the Indoor Football League. I like the rules better. But again, if I could change anything, I'd have the nets and the defensive rules. And I think together that might be the best way to play football indoors.
Yeah, when you look at both styles, it's like, yes, they play on a 50-yard field, but to your point, defensively, it's like AFL, they stuck them in the box. You couldn't leave the box. Yes. IFL, you're not allowed in the box. So it's like, it's total opposite at the same time. So it's like, it's 50-yard football, but they couldn't be further apart in some aspects. And it's just fascinating to see the sport grow and evolve.
The running game. I mean, the first game I did on the sideline, Tucson was having quarterback issues. They ran the ball 8 of their first 9 plays. And I was like, what sport am I watching? What is going on? Nobody runs the ball. And now look, they didn't feel great about the quarterback. I get it. Now, with Jerome Johnson, I think they feel like they can sling it around. They're playing great ball, but somewhere there's a balance. I don't think anybody wants to come to an indoor game and see somebody win, 23-17. I think you want more fireworks. I think you want more offense. And I think that some of the teams in this league have found, a pretty good balance of what they can do defensively and then mixing it up with both the pass and the run. But yeah, if you're a football person who likes the X's and O's, I just think that the Indoor Football League is a really good option because of the rule differences and that scoring is harder to do. And that you don't always assume points. I mean, I think early in the season, I felt like Sid and I were always saying, "When should you onside kick here? There's 50 seconds left in the half," because we would just assume, like we did from our arena football mindset. You're like, well, if they're going to score anyway, I want to get one more possession. Well, I've learned in this league that the points aren't automatic. The defenses can stop you. So it's had to change my thinking about how you manage possessions at the end of the half and the end of the game.
Yeah, especially back in the day, too, when they were Ironman rules. Like you would have a DB out there who was a wide receiver first and a DB second. And that's why they were scoring so many points, because he was a fish out there.
Keep in mind, you can only sub them once a quarter. So depending on how that coach managed it, you might have a guy out there was just dog tired, right? I mean, he literally had nothing left in the tank. So deciding who would play first in a quarter, all those little decisions, I think, made arena in some ways more interesting. And I think a lot of the fans really didn't even know that part of the game, right? It's not like we made an announcement. Greg Hopkins had been subbed out one time already this quarter. So if he comes out again, he's dead for the quarter. But that added some nuance and some strategy to it. But I think part of the problem there is you'd have guys really tired on kickoffs and stuff. And it could look a little ragged at times just because they were too tired.
Right.
I always believed I preferred open substitution because I want guys fresh out there making plays. 100%. But I will say this and say it with confidence. I loved Ironman football because I think there was something so blue collar. And I think it's part of why in Albany it resonated so much is here was this guy who's making an honest living. He's not some rich fancy guy in the NFL, and he has his natural position, and then he has to learn a position on the other side of the ball that he probably hasn't played since high school or Pop Warner.
Yeah.
So you had to have a coach like Mike Daly who could take, let's say, a great defensive end and turn him into an offensive lineman who could play both ways. So whereas from a scheme point of view, there's a lot more coaching in the IFL. In terms of developing a player to play both ways, well, that's where Ironman football, I think, separated the Arena Football League at that time, because I think people really admired the fact that except for two guys on offense and two guys on defense, everybody played both ways.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, what excites you about the rest of this IFL season? I think we are in for a treat down this final stretch here.
Well, I think that the playoff stories are great. I mean, we're seeing some teams that are finding their way late in the year. You look at Tulsa and Tucson, right? I mean, these are teams that a month ago you thought, well, forget about them, or there's no way we're going to be talking about them, in late June and July, talking about the playoffs. So I think like ascending teams are interesting. And then obviously the teams at the top, right? I mean, we know it was Vegas and Green Bay. Could it be a rematch? Of course it could be a rematch. Jacksonville is going to have something to say about it. I think that Fishers is one of the most interesting teams in the league because their style of play is unlike anyone else. Part of, for me this year, Trey, has been that it's one thing for me to watch a game. It's another to call a game. So I just got a game added. The last game of the regular season is Green Bay at Jacksonville. So I'm now calling that game in the booth. That will help me a lot in the playoffs. Yeah. And we did the championship game because, one of those two might end up in the championship game. So there's just a lot of great storylines. I think the West, I've had a lot more games out West. So I have a much deeper level of knowledge at this point. Any of the four teams right now that are slated to get in wouldn't shock me if they end up playing the national championship game, right? You can make a case for Tucson right now. Look, Arizona, I'm never going to bet against Kevin Guy.
No.
San Diego right now has the best record out West. And then you've got Vegas, who's the defending champ, who I think has the two most dynamic players in the game in their quarterback and Tomas. So I still think that, at the end of the day, Vegas is going to be there in the conference championship game. But the stories out West where all four teams, you can make a compelling case, could end up in the championship game is all you want as a broadcaster. That it's not going to be one of those things where the one's playing the four and it's just a bygone conclusion that the one is exactly win, right? If Tucson goes to San Diego, I'm not sure who I'd pick to win that game right now.
Right.
And that is all you can ask for as a broadcaster, is that every game means something. You have no idea what to expect. In fact, we were talking about potential host cities for the Western Conference Championship game. So obviously only the 4 seed can't host it. And you can see a world where the 1 and 2 both lose. And then at least as it stands today, Arizona could host the championship game because of the 3 seed. There's not usually very many seasons, Trey, where you think the number 3 seed has a chance to host.
You have to account for it though.
Yeah. So I'm just excited. Look, the bigger picture thing I'm going to add said into this is that we've both been looking for a home to be a part of something for the long term, where we can be announcers that you can just count on week to week. They're going to be a part of it. And thanks to Brent Stover, and thanks to Jared, and thanks to the commissioner, Todd Tryon, Seth and I have now landed not just in a new place, but in a great place. We feel so good about the way this season has gone. I think it's exceeded both of our expectations exponentially. I had a real sour taste in my mouth from what happened in my last experience with the Arena League and then with AF1 last year, only doing 4 games before they let me and Sid go. I feel like this league is trending in the right direction. So there's this postseason, but it's the cumulative knowledge of being around a league year after year that I think separates broadcasters. So it's almost like I want to fast forward where I've done the IFL for a number of years. We got to get through year 1 first, but I'm hoping this is only the beginning of a long relationship because I'm really excited about the direction of the league.
That's so great to hear. And I'm also excited about it. And I think that just this being the year 1, like you said, it sets such a great foundation for what's ahead. So I'm excited to hear you instead.
From what I understand, they didn't present the games the way they are now last year, right? Mm-hmm. It was mostly local announcers, and it was only available on YouTube. I watched some of these games on Yahoo, and I'm not working on a Sunday night, and it's a good show. You've got really professional announcers, the uniforms. I feel like just everything from the team names to the team colors, the uniforms, they're doing a lot of things right. I am very bullish on the future of the IFL.
As am I, and I'm excited to see it grow and see it go from here. But I appreciate you taking the time to hop on here with me and talk shop a bit. I'm excited to, like I said, see you and said continue to be involved in the 50-yard game. So thank you so much for the time.
It was an absolute pleasure. You took me down memory lane. Those are some fun memories. I got a feeling I'm going to be talking about this the rest of the night with my family. I'll be chewing their ear off. So, Trey, I appreciate what you do. Don't underestimate your value, because you connect people to this sport in a way that not many people can. And I love the fact that all indoor football is in your purview, right? It's not just one league. You love them all. You support these players. You give a platform to these players and coaches for them to feel good about their sport. So keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job.
Absolutely, I will do. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Big thanks to Ari for joining the program and talking through his journey again, hearing his journey through Albany to Philadelphia to doing stuff with the league and, things coming to a screeching halt in the Arena Football League, but it being one of the best things that's ever happened to him was so cool to hear. And just to hear his journey through everything and the evolution of sideline reporting in the 50-yard sport, which is very exciting to hear from his perspective and to hear just all of his experiences. And I feel like we're only scratching the surface there. So definitely have to get him on again and have him back here in the future to dive a little bit further. But we'll be hearing Ari Wolfe a lot more the rest of this season in the IFL. So very excited to hear him in the booth in the indoor game. So we're going to dive into the IFL first. They had a really fun weekend of games this past weekend. It started on Friday night in Oceanside, California, where the San Diego Strike Force defeated the Vegas Nighthawks 43-39. So this was a game I had circled on the calendar for a very long time. Very, very good matchup of teams that we could potentially see meet up in the playoffs, depending on how seeding and everything works out. But San Diego was my preseason favorite to win it all, and Vegas has just been, through the first half of the season, was just a juggernaut and just mowing through teams. But they're hitting a little bit of a lull here, and it seems like they're making some adjustments on both sides of the ball to, break through this little slump that they're in and go back to their form that they were in when they were 9-1 and just smacking teams around. But for San Diego, this was a much needed win for them to gain that number one spot in the Western Conference. And a lot of talk around the San Diego team is like, yeah, they're 8-2, but they have not really beaten a ton of good teams. Most of their, like half of their wins were against Northern Arizona and New Mexico. So this was a real statement win for them, and they have a tough stretch ahead to end the season. But starting off, Ed Vander came back from injury in this one, and he immediately made his presence felt. 26 touches, including 16 rushes and 10 catches through the passing game, 95 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 1 touchdown through the air. He's just such a dynamic player and like a Swiss Army knife for this San Diego offense, and really makes things tick. And when you put somebody that's a surgeon at quarterback like Nate Davis with a piece like that at running back in Vander, good things are going to happen. So I think this was the prototypical San Diego offense that we'll see the rest of the season, where Vander is the workhorse running the ball, and then they open things up in the passing game for Blackman, Hooks, and Daniels, and Sample once he gets back healthy as well. So San Diego, much deserved win and much needed win for them to get them on the right path heading into the final quarter of the season. But for Vegas, I think the story of this game was San Diego's defensive line just absolutely disrupting the Vegas offensive line and their whole offensive rhythm in the first half. Jane DeLaura did end up having 220 yards passing, 4 passing touchdowns, finding Quentin Randolph and Deshaun Stoudemire twice each. But in the first half, he was doing a lot of running backwards, and it felt like San Diego was getting to him every other play. And it was just not something we're typically used to seeing from this Vegas Nighthawks offense. And Josh Tomas couldn't really get going on the ground like we've seen them do. But Deshaun Stoudemire was able to take a few like high man motion sweeps, 3 rushes, 34 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he was able to make an impact on the ground game and keep this team in it. And Vegas recovered an onside kick in the final minute of the game that made it seem like, oh boy, Vegas is going to claw victory from the hands of defeat. But San Diego was able to hold on just in time and seal the win. But this is a great game, and I'm really looking forward to seeing these two teams match up again down the line in a couple of weeks, and then hopefully we see them match up again in the playoffs. Next game we're going to talk about is in Fishers, Indiana, where the Iowa Barnstormers took on the Fishers Freight, and Fishers absolutely crushed the Barnstormers 55-13. This was one that was kind of predictable going into it. Fishers just outmatched Iowa in every way possible. This Fisher's offense was just too big and too physical for this Iowa team. And honestly, Fishers really didn't need to do a ton. They didn't really need to do a lot to lean on Fishers and really take advantage of the mismatch. Iowa, they didn't look terrible in the first half. It looked like they were going to be able to keep it a close-ish game and probably cover the spread. But the second half, they just fell apart and things got ugly really, really quickly. And like I said, for Fishers, they didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They didn't have to do a lot here. They stuck to their identity. They ran the ball efficiently. They blocked a couple of kicks. They returned one of them for a touchdown. So they didn't need to have an A-plus game on offense. And they absolutely crushed Iowa in this one. So Iowa's long season continues, where you look at their schedule ahead and it's tough to find another spot where they can steal a victory. David Elder continues to be like that lone bright spot on this offense, while Dante Avila Santos seems like he's the guy this week. Will he be the guy next week? Who knows? While Iowa tries to figure something out, but an absolutely dominating performance by Fishers and a win that they needed as this Eastern Conference playoff race gets a lot more crowded in the middle, and we're going to have a very, very good team on the outside looking in the Eastern Conference, just based on how things are shaking out. But the next game we're going to go to another Eastern Conference team, the Tulsa Oilers. They hosted the San Antonio Gunslingers, and they won 54-25. So Tulsa beats the Gunslingers for a third time this season, and this was probably the most dominant one of those three, where Gunslingers came in fresh off of a 74-point performance on offense against the New Mexico Chupacabras, and it looked like, all right, San Antonio may be turning the corner here. They may be finally breaking through on offense, and then they just regressed back to what they were before. Zach Calzada did not have a good game in this one. He was just getting flustered by this Tulsa defense, eventually getting ejected towards the end of the game due to a little bit of bottom of the pile shenanigans, we'll just say. But yeah, Tulsa absolutely dominated this game from start to finish. This is a prototypical TJ Edwards game as well, where they were able to throw the ball initially to get that sizable lead, and then they were able to lean on him in the running game. TJ Edwards, 50 yards on the ground, 1 touchdown on the ground, 3 touchdowns through the air. Caleb Ramseur got in the mix on the ground game, and then Draylon Ellis, who came over as a part of that Tucson trade, got in the mix late and ended up scoring a touchdown on the ground as well. So this was another game similar to the Fishers game where Tulsa didn't need to be A-plus on offense. TJ didn't need to be slinging it around the yard and throwing for 250 yards on 190 yards. He didn't need to be doing any of that to control this game and win this game. So, yeah, Tulsa, probably the hottest team in the Eastern Conference right now, winning 5 straight, going from 2-5 to 7-5. And you blink and they're in the 3 spot of the Eastern Conference. And there's a strong chance, depending on how things shake out with the Jacksonville Sharks ahead of them. Jacksonville and Tulsa play in a couple of weeks, and that could be a game that is very, very meaningful for both of them and could ultimately decide who's the 2 seed, who's the 3 seed, and who gets home field for the playoffs. So Tulsa absolutely dominated this game. San Antonio did just enough to cover the over at the very end of the game, which we appreciate them for. But yeah, Tulsa, hottest team in the East. They continue to prove that they belong, and kind of showing that 2-5 start was a bit of a fluke. Next game we're going to talk about is the Tucson Sugar Skulls hosting the Arizona Rattlers, and Tucson won this game 35-28. So Tucson, the hottest team in the West, Tulsa, the hottest team in the East, and Tucson's been playing unbelievable football these past couple of weeks. I believe winning 4 straight and improving to 6-6 on the year. It was looking like they were going to be dead in the water unless they could figure out the quarterback position, and they got that figured out with the acquisition of Jerome Johnson. But for Tucson, Jerome didn't really have a really good game in this one. It was one of the lesser Jerome Johnson games that we've seen, but he was still they were still able to win. And I think that's a very good sign for this Tucson Sugar Skulls team moving forward, where early on in the season, if they were having bad quarterback games, they were drowning and they were buried right at the beginning. And there was no coming back from it. But overall, as a team on offense, they were able to stick through it, establish a bit of a running game, made just enough plays through the passing game to take the lead and eventually hold on to it. Brandon Mackey, 2 rushing touchdowns on the day and 1 receiving touchdown as well. And yeah, Tucson was able to make just enough plays down the stretch, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to steal this game and basically solidify themselves as the 4 seed moving forward. And don't blink, but they could potentially leapfrog Arizona based on how Arizona's kind of sliding and Tucson's rising. So looking at Arizona, this was not one of their better games as well. Listening to the Rattlers Uncoiled podcast this past week, sounds like they were having a ton of injury issues on the offensive line, where on a 25-man roster, 3 offensive linemen were hurt. And so they were having to bring bodies in, and one of the guys was only able to practice once. The other was having to learn on the fly, and that's just not a good recipe for them. So knowing that, kind of have a little bit of empathy based on how this game turned out. But still, you're the Arizona Rattlers. You have multiple MVPs on this offense. You have an unbelievable skill position group. You should be able to score more than 28 points. And it's the second consecutive week where the offense has kind of underperformed and lost a 1-possession game. So to me, this kind of raises a question. Do you stick with Drew Powell at quarterback moving forward, or do you flip back to Max Myler and get him in the game for a get-right game against New Mexico next week, set them up for success heading into the playoffs, and kind of give him a decent on-ramp to be impactful and be effective? Powell had 3 interceptions in this one, and a couple of the passes were just bad reads, bad throws, and you can't have that. Like, they needed this game. If they would have won this game, it wouldn't have sealed a playoff spot, but it would have essentially sealed a playoff spot for them. But now they will make the playoffs. It's just a matter of what seed they're going to make the playoffs now. So do they want to be the 3? No, definitely not. They want to be that 2 seed. They want to host a home playoff game. But right now, they're in that 3 spot, and unless Vegas really stumbles, or unless San Diego really stumbles, it's not looking like they're going to have a home playoff game. And I believe they haven't had every time they've been to the playoffs, they've had at least 1 home game every year since like 2010 or 2011, I think the stat is. So that would be the ending of a very, very long streak of consecutive years with at least 1 home playoff game. So Arizona, they got to get their act together, whether it's just through healing, whether it's just through getting guys healthy, getting back on track, adjusting the scheme, or adjusting personnel. They got to do something because, we're used to seeing them score in the high 40s, low 50s. We've seen them touch the 60s a couple of times. Scoring 28 after jumping out to a 14-0 lead in the first quarter, that's just not good enough. A lot of points were left on the board. So Arizona's got their work cut out for them. But Tucson, they're on the rise and winning 4 straight, and they'll look to continue their rise. I just worry about them potentially getting too hot too early in the season. They still have last quarter of the season to go. You don't want them to peak now. You want them to continue to go and grow. So Tucson will be a very fun team to watch moving forward. Then moving over to Sunday, the first game of the Sunday slate, we had the Northern Arizona Wranglers going to Albuquerque, New Mexico to face the Chupacabras, and New Mexico won this game 35-32. So going into this one, both teams were 1-10, and somebody had to walk out victorious. Somebody had to win this one. And New Mexico found a way to come back from a second half double-digit deficit. And they were able to score with a couple minutes left. What was it? Score with less than a minute left, yeah, to take the lead and to ultimately win their second game of the season. So for New Mexico, it's very clear that the offense runs through LaJames White on the ground. He had 15 carries for 76 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one. And every time they get even close to the red zone or within 5 yards of the goal line, they pretty much run a wildcat with him, and it's the LaJames White show. Donovan Portery, you know what you're going to get at this point. And if I'm New Mexico, moving forward, I want Von Rucker getting out there and getting reps and seeing if he's potentially the quarterback of the future for the Chupacabras. You know what you're getting with Donovan. You're 1-10 at this point, or 2-10 at this point after the win this week. You know what you get. He's 38 years old. he is what he is at this point. I would love to see them go to Rucker for the rest of the season. Just let him play, let him make mistakes, let him go out there and do it. Because honestly, based on what we saw out of Rucker in Vegas, he'd probably have similar production to what Porter Reed was already doing, especially with that wide receiver group that they have with Arthur Jackson leading the way. So he's got the weapons to be impactful. It's just a matter of kind of letting him go out there and do his thing. But they also had really cool jerseys in this one. So side note, it was like Breaking Bad inspired blue jerseys, which is kind of odd because the blue is for meth. So they had meth jerseys and like they fully leaned into it with like a meth ball. It was awesome. I loved it. I love Breaking Bad, but it's just interesting to be on the outside looking into that. But for Northern Arizona, this was a tough one because again they had a double-digit lead in the second half of the game, and they just couldn't close it out. They had multiple opportunities in short field situations to add points to the scoreboard and really bury the Chupacabras, but they just kept settling for field goals way too often. And while we love us some Manny Higuera, when you go for 5 field goal attempts and then you go 1 for 5, and a lot of them were deeper attempts, that's not good. It's just not good. So offensively, they really struggled in this one. Anthony Garrett, only 12 for 29 passing the ball, 3 touchdowns through the air, which is great. Actually, 4 touchdowns through the air, which is really great, but ultimately couldn't finish on those late drives that would have added points to the scoreboard and put the game out of reach for New Mexico, no matter how hard they tried. So this Northern Arizona team continues to struggle this season for a second straight year. They did end up making a coaching change after this game. Coach Ron James is no longer the head coach of the Northern Arizona Wranglers. So they'll have Coach Hendricks taking over interim head coach duties. So we'll have to see how that looks for them moving forward. But New Mexico gets their second win of the year. Northern Arizona is still struggling a bit, and Northern Arizona, it doesn't get easier for them. They get the white hot Tucson Sugar Skulls next week as well. But the final game of the IFL slate on Sunday was the Jacksonville Sharks going down to Orlando, Florida to face the Orlando Pirates, and Orlando won this game 54-42. And Orlando was in full control of this game from the very beginning. Paxton DeLaurent had a really, really good game and ended up being named the IFL Offensive Player of the Week. 2 touchdowns through the air, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and he was just moving and grooving and really facilitating this offense in a really great way. Puka Williams was the jack of all trades that we're used to seeing from him, especially in the kick return game. It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he was gaining 15, 16 yards and getting it close to midfield for an offense that really doesn't need help shortening the field. This Orlando Pirates offense just consistently was getting down the field and putting points on the board. You look at their quarter breakdown: 14 first quarter, 13 second quarter, 14 third quarter, 13 fourth quarter, just stacking up points consistently. And they just look like a night and day different team when they play at home. When they are a home team, they're 5-0. They're averaging 53 points per game, which is pretty spot on for what they ended up scoring here. But when they're away or at neutral site, they're averaging 43 points per game. So much, much less. So they only have one more home game because they gave up 2 home games for the IFL Cup. So they have one more home game against the Green Bay Blizzard, the number 1 team in the East, but the rest of their games are going to be on the road. So they need to fix their road woes very, very quickly in order to be able to clinch that playoff spot and stiff arm Fishers and prevent them from potentially leapfrogging them. But this Orlando team, this offense has been great. The defense was much, much improved after shuffling the deck with a variety of signings, we'll just say. And the defensive line played really, really well for the Pirates, and they were disruptive for the Sharks offense that really couldn't get things going until it was way too late. So great win for Orlando to keep themselves in a position for the playoffs, and they're going to have to win some games on the road here and look like a much improved road team in order to solidify themselves in that playoff spot. Flipping over to Jacksonville, they made a quarterback change and before this game, and I made a video and threw it on social media, kind of diving into it. They ended up pivoting away from James Cahoon and moving over to Sammy Edwards. So James Cahoon was 9-2 as a starter, didn't have a great game against the Green Bay Blizzard, but ended up going to Sammy Edwards. I guess, having some conversations with people around the league, inside, outside of the Sharks organization. It sounds like the ownership and coaching staff really wanted to make a move over to Sammy Edwards, and they did. They pulled the trigger. And Sammy Edwards did not look good in this first half of this game. He was holding on to the ball way too long. Several read option plays that they were running, especially on that first drive. He was keeping the ball every single time, not really utilizing Jimmy Robinson in that running game. So that could be kudos to Orlando for forcing his hand into keeping it. But he really excelled this year in short yardage and goal line situations of being the read option guy. And now he's tasked with being the quarterback for the entire operation, passing, running, all that stuff. So he didn't look good in the first half. He did settle down eventually and kind of started to get into a groove in the second half. Marcus Rogers made his season debut after coming down from the CFL, caught 2 touchdowns in this one from Sammy. But Sammy's going to have to get some other people involved outside of Marcus Rogers. Jimmy Robinson got in the mix, I think, a little too late in this one. 10 total touches for Jimmy. That's not going to be good enough, especially when you want to get him involved early to establish that run game so that that read option that they want to run with Sammy ends up working out. And, you're proving that the handoff to Jimmy Robinson is a viable threat. So first game of the Sammy Edwards era for Jacksonville, not great, but they got 4 more games to get it figured out before the playoffs start. They got a tough test ahead with the number 1 team in the West, San Diego Strike Force, coming to town. So it's a gamble switching quarterbacks after a 9-2 start. They still control their own destiny in terms of playoffs and home games and home field advantage and all that stuff. So the world is ahead of them. But I think there's a very real possibility they go 2-2, maybe 1-3 in these final games based on how they looked against this Orlando team. So if they go 2-2, that might be enough to hold on to that 2 seed. If they go 1-3, the way Tulsa is playing, I wouldn't be surprised if they potentially leapfrog Jacksonville based on how they're playing. So Jacksonville, it's a big risk switching quarterbacks this late, and I dive into the Cahoon situation on social, so I'm not going to dive into it here. So go check out that video if you want. But Jacksonville, very good team, very good defense. They just got caught flat-footed, and they'll make the adjustments. But like I said, they have a very tough final 4 games ahead of them. They should definitely make the playoffs. Will they get a home game? That's the big question. We're going to flip over to the NAL now. They had their championship game this past weekend. It was the Sunflower Showdown between the Salina Liberty and the Southwest Kansas Storm. And Southwest Kansas emerged victorious on their home field, 42-38, in a dramatic finish that was as good as advertised, and just a really solid ending to a really solid NAL season as a whole. Trey Self ended up having a really good game in this one, ended up throwing the game-winning touchdown pass, I believe, with like 2 seconds left or 3 seconds left, finding Mason Pierce for that game-winning score. Only 1 passing touchdown in the game, but it came when it mattered because they were primarily punching it in on the ground. Jaden Sutton getting 2 touchdowns on the ground, Mason Pierce getting a couple as well, and then Trey Self getting 1. So 5 touchdowns on the ground, 1 through the air, but that 1 through the air was in the dying moments and came through when they needed it the most. Amarius Washington was the clear wide receiver 1 in this one, 6 catches, 96 yards, and very well deserved for Southwest Kansas, who pretty much from wire to wire was looking like the best team in the NAL. And they didn't finish the full undefeated dream season, but they basically were dominant from the beginning until the end, and got that home field all throughout the playoffs, and ended up beating their in-state rival Salina for the title. So big shout out to Coach Thomas for getting that big win in Dodge City. And 4 years ago, he wasn't really in the indoor arena game, and flash forward, he's winning championships and adjusting along the way. So big shout out to Coach Thomas and that Southwest Kansas organization for repping the small markets in the best way possible. But for Salina, this was about as close as you can get. I mean, early on, it was looking like this was going to be like a 50-60 game. Like they were just going back and forth. Eventually slowed down just a little bit. Tracy Brooks was doing Tracy Brooks things. 2 touchdowns on the ground, 50 yards rushing, ended up getting a 2-point conversion as well. Tyree Adams was pretty impactful in this one. A touchdown on the ground, 50 yards rushing, and then 2 passing touchdowns. So if Southwest Kansas didn't pull off the win at the very last second. You're probably looking at Tyree Adams as the championship game MVP for how well he performed in this one. But yeah, Salina was just so close to pulling it out in this one, and both teams coming over from AF1 last year, making it to the NAL title game, adjusting from that arena style rule set to this indoor style rule set that kind of fit each of them a little bit better anyway, and adjusting some of those same pieces that came over from the AF1 last year was really cool to see. So a really good season for Salina, all things considered. A lot of change throughout the year for them, especially at the quarterback position, going from Lewandowski over to Adams, and really beginning to hit their stride at the perfect time late in the season and making that run to the championship game. So overall, really solid NAL season as a whole. It was about as competitive as you would hope if you're a big NAL fan going into the season. It looked like it was going to be the Omaha, Colorado show. Both those teams kind of struggled, and you saw Southwest Kansas come out high. You saw Pueblo come out high. You saw Sioux City kind of rise through the ranks. You saw Salina start off hot, dip a little bit, and then reemerge towards the end. So heading into the playoffs, you can make a legitimate case for all 6 teams to potentially be the ones holding up the trophy at the end. And that's a dream scenario if you're the NAL, if you're a fan of any of the, well, maybe not a fan of any of those teams, but if you're a fan of indoor football and the National Arena League, that was about as good of an ending as you could possibly imagine. So already got some expansion stuff in the works for next year, and I'm sure we'll hear more and more as the fall approaches and as we hit warp speed in the off season. But overall, pretty good NAL campaign in 2026, all things considered. We're going to flip over to the AF1 now. They had 4 games this past weekend with all remaining 8 teams in action. First game of the weekend was down in Texas. The Oceanside Bombers went to Beaumont to face the Beaumont Renegades, and Beaumont won this game 30-26. Not going to lie, this was a kind of a boring one, all things considered, especially when you look at the game that happened later that day. But this was this was an interesting game to see because for Beaumont, Coach Clinton Solomon is back at OC for the Beaumont Renegades, where he was the OC last year for their championship run in the NAL. So getting him back in the mix, albeit with a different rule set and a different league, was obviously worked out for them. They went back to Carl Robinson, that quarterback, who was the quarterback with Solo last year, and Robinson had a great day passing the ball, 19 for 24, 145 passing yards, and 4 touchdowns through the air. They were able to be a little bit impactful on the ground, not nearly as much as they were last year with Solo at the helm, but distributing the ball pretty evenly on offense. And like I said, this wasn't the most exciting game in the world for either team, but Beaumont ended up holding on for the win. Mark Salazar over on Oceanside got the start, going 17 for 36, 118 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air, finding Tyler Kennedy 9 times for 101 yards and 1 touchdown. Benson Strange Jr., 3 catches, 25 yards, and a touchdown. So this wasn't the prettiest game by any stretch. It was one of the better broadcasts for Beaumont that we've seen so far. It's never great when you see 56 total points scored in an arena football game. But yeah, this was a tougher one to watch, and immediately got blown out of the water by then a game we'll talk about next. But Oceanside really struggling to find another win. Ended up beating Beaumont earlier this year, but haven't really been able to replicate some of that same success since. But Beaumont, very interesting team where if everything breaks for them, they could potentially sneak into the playoffs. And with a rejuvenated Carl Robinson reunited with his championship OC, that could be interesting, all things considered. But the next game of the AF1 slate, the Albany Firebirds went to Clarksville to face the Nashville Cats, and Nashville won this game 78-69. So game of the year by far for the AF1 this season, where both teams were just going back and forth, up and down the field, and they were just constantly lighting up the scoreboard. And starting with Nashville, Malik Honeycutt, 3 kick return touchdowns. I believe it was 3 in a row. Like, it was something where like the Nashville offense hardly saw the field for a long stretch of time because Honeycutt was just returning kickoffs for touchdowns and saying, "No, I got this. Chill, guys." So Malik Honeycutt, unbelievable performance in this one. Those 3 kickoff return touchdowns and then 8 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown on offense as well. Tyler Kolka didn't really have to do a ton in this 131 passing yards and a touchdown. A lot of production in the rushing attack for this Nashville offense. And then Kyle Kaplan ended up putting 24 points on the board by way of 9 extra points, 6 deuces, and a field goal. So lit up the scoreboard there. I believe he set the AF1 record for deuces in a game. So everything broke the right way, especially on special teams for this Nashville Cats team, as they are the solo number 1 in the AF1 right now after knocking off Albany and giving Albany their 2nd straight loss of the season. But for Albany, offensively, they were getting it done. Like they were doing what they needed to do. But defensively and on special teams, it was just a massive, massive letdown for them. And Sam Cachanova had probably one of the best stat lines and one of the best quarterback games you'll ever see. But unfortunately, it was on the losing end, and they just really couldn't do much about it. Cachanova, 29 for 48, 356 yards, and 10 passing touchdowns. And they lost by 9. That just shows how everything was breaking in Nashville's favor in this game on offense and special teams. Tyrese Chambers exploding for 4 receiving touchdowns in this one. Cameron Alves, 2 receiving touchdowns in this one. Darian Townsend, 2 receiving touchdowns. So many folks were getting in the mix and getting involved, but Albany's defense really let them down for a second consecutive week. And if you're looking at the Albany's season so far, defensively, they were beating up on some of the smaller teams or some of the teams lower on the standings than them. But when you look at how they performed against Nashville, when you look at how they performed against Michigan both times, this defense is suddenly looking like it's a problem. And what do you do? what do you do at this point? So I know they were beating the drum of not being fully healthy leading into this one. So I'm sure that's the drum they'll continue to beat after this week. But they're in control of their own destiny in terms of having a home playoff game, and if they can knock off Nashville again, or not again, but if they can knock off Nashville when they replay in 2.5-3 weeks, could see them in a spot where they could regain that number 1 seed in full home field. But this was a wild one to watch unfold, and Nashville definitely deserved it. And Malik Honeycutt and Kyle Kaplan having an unbelievable performance for the Cats. Next game we're going to talk about took place in the Pacific Northwest, where the Washington Wolfpack hosted the Kentucky Barrels and defeated Kentucky 47-42. So the Washington Wolfpack cracking above 500 in the standings for the first time in franchise history, 5-4 on the year so far, by far their best season of arena football. And it's cool to see the program and everything kind of come together and fall into place because they've been doing everything right off the field. It's just been waiting on the on-field product to catch up and to get to where they want it to be. But starting with Washington, defensively, they played really, really well in this one. They ended up forcing Darrell Overstreet of Kentucky into 3 interceptions. I believe there was a fumble recovered as well. So this defense for Washington has been playing extremely well, all things considered. But on the offensive side of the ball, Eric Phoenix got the start in this one, 5 passing touchdowns, 222 passing yards. He was finding Deshaun Williams and Akil Greer up and down the field. Brandon Lambana ended up getting his first career touchdown, which was really, really cool to see. But this was a super impressive victory by this Washington Wolfpack team against, this is probably their biggest victory in their franchise's history against this Kentucky team that was sitting at 7-2 and potentially knocking on the door of being a top 1 or 2 seed, depending on how the rest of the season shook out for them. Suddenly, they dropped this game to Washington, and this game could be the difference between Kentucky getting a potential home playoff game and having to be a road dog in the playoffs. So great overall performance by the Washington Wolfpack. Best defense in the AF1 from a stats and scoring perspective. And Akil Greer, Deshaun Williams, Tyler Stevens, Brandon Lambana, really solid receiving core as well. So this Washington team seems to be peaking at around hopefully they're not totally peaking, but they're getting hot at the right time and making a push. And hopefully we see them host a home playoff game, because that fan base that has suffered through 2 years of not so great football really deserves to see a home playoff game. But for Kentucky, Overstreet Jr. got the start here. 249 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns. But again, those 3 interceptions were just super costly. Karance Higgins, 9 catches for 124 yards and 3 touchdowns. And overall, as a whole, this I feel bad for this Kentucky team, because their schedule got all jacked up with Oregon folding, and then their schedule getting shaken up, where suddenly, hey, in 4 days you're going out to Washington to face the Washington Wolfpack. Oh, and you're not playing Albany in a couple of weeks for your chance at a revenge game from avenging one of your losses earlier in the year. So I kind of feel for them. It looked like they flew into Washington early in the morning to face, or flew in on the same day as the game. So a rough travel experience there, but that shouldn't be an excuse given the quality of roster that this Kentucky team has up and down, offense and defense. They should have been able to steal this game and win this one on the road. But Kentucky's now sitting at 7-3 on the year, and it's looking like they're for sure going to be in the playoffs. It's just a matter of, do they get a home field advantage against and who they play against. And if they get a get back game against Albany, it's likely going to be in Albany at this point. So tough one for Kentucky to drop, and one that could be a game that we look back on at the end of the season and say, like, this game determined a lot of things for both of these teams. Then the last game of the slate in the AF1 was the Michigan Arsenal going to Minnesota to face the Minnesota Monsters, and Michigan won this game 41-34. So Michigan looking like the hottest team in the AF1, dethroning Albany, and then coming in and holding on for the victory against Minnesota. Starting with Michigan, Malik Henry, solid game overall as a whole. 4 passing touchdowns, 160 passing yards. I get accused of being a Malik Henry hater a lot, but he doesn't really pass the eye test for me. A lot of throws off the back foot, which we've touched on a ton in this on this program on Arena Football Weekly. Some of it is not his fault. Some of it is the O-line's fault, where like he's getting a ton of pressure, but he trusts his arm a little bit too much at times, in my opinion, and it sometimes gets him into trouble, where his arm can save him with some dot throws, but that confidence in his arm can sometimes get him into some trouble, and he makes some throws that he really shouldn't be making. But it was enough to win this game, and Minnesota looked like they had a chance at the end to potentially steal this one, but Jarius Grissom, 10 catches, 107 yards, and four receiving touchdowns, so catching all the touchdown passes from Malik Henry. Dan Williams, pretty quiet day on this one, 2 catches, 4 yards. It was the Grissom show, and he was catching anything and everything and making it happen. Defensively, they were able to keep this Monsters offense in check, and 34 in Arena Football, pretty good number, all things considered. So it seems like the Michigan defense is starting to rise up at the right time, allowing 34 this week, allowing 39 last week to Albany. So this team is currently in the 6th spot, I believe, in the playoff race. And if they continue the trajectory that they're on, they get Oceanside back-to-back in a couple of weeks. Forget who they get next week, but they have a chance to legitimately be 7-6 at the end of the season. And considering how their season started, that would be amazing. And that would be a great first year for this Arsenal squad. And, with Malik Henry's arm, anything can happen in the playoffs. And you've seen that they took Albany to the limit the first time they played, and then they beat Albany a little bit later. So if they can beat Albany, they can beat anybody. So that this Michigan Arsenal team can be very dangerous with the offensive weapons that they have. But for Minnesota, Javonte Johnson, this was a game to forget, all things considered. He did have 4 passing touchdowns, 196 passing yards, but 16 for 43 is a brutal completion percentage. I know I put a lot of emphasis on that, but when you're dropping back 43 times and only putting the ball into play 16 times, that's 27 dead plays, basically, where you're getting zero productivity, and that's just not good enough. That's just not good enough in the AF1. But they were able to spread the ball out pretty evenly amongst the team. Jarvey Flowers were hauling in a touchdown in his first game with Minnesota against his old team in Michigan. That's a whole situation. Andre Williams catching a passing touchdown. Carlos Thomas Jr. catching a couple passing touchdowns as well. I think this Minnesota defense played pretty well, all things considered, but this is probably one of the better defenses in the league from a talent perspective, especially on that defensive line. And if Javonte Johnson can catch fire, this Minnesota team is not really one that I would really be jumping at the bit to play in the first round of the playoffs. And the way things are shaking out, Washington plays Minnesota, I think, a little bit later on this season. It's looking like that might be the matchup in the first round of the playoffs between those two teams. It's just a matter of where's the game held? Is it going to be in Washington? Is it going to be in Minnesota? But one thing is clear, Javonte Johnson has got to play better at the quarterback position in order for those defensive efforts to even mean anything. And that's the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to check it out. A long one today, but great conversation with Mr. Ari Wolfe. A lot of ball to dive into with IFL, NAL, and AF1. So, yeah, if you don't already, please make sure you're following us on socials at Off the Wall FB. F as in foot, B as in ball. Off the Wall FB. We're on Instagram, X/Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. I said Instagram already. All the links are in the description below. So just scroll down just a hair. It's right there. offthewallfb.com as well. And then Royal Retros, click through that link. Use code Off the Wall, get 10% off your purchase. You save a little money. I get a little kickback. Royal Retros sends you something cool. Literally everybody wins. So let me know what you end up getting on there. And then call to action if you haven't done it already. Let me know what you think the team name for the Athens team is going to be for the expansion next year in the IFL. Looks like they're announcing their coach today when this drops, and then releasing some of the finalist names on Monday, which is the 26th, 27th, 29th. So Monday the 29th, they'll have some name finalists released. So let me know what you think in the comments, what you think a good name for an Athens IFL team would be. There's only 24 hours in a day. The fact that you chose to spend about an hour 40, an hour 50. God, this is a long one. I'm sorry. Here, listening to this show, watching the show means a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time to do so. Come engage on socials. Come join the conversation. Love chopping it up with folks. I've got some cool things in the mix. May have a little thingy here with these AFL cards coming soon. So we got episode 100 next week. So I'm figuring out some cool stuff to do for that. So big thank you to all the love and support so far. Yeah, let's have ourselves a great weekend of indoor and arena football ahead. We got IFL, AF1, and TAL as well. So TAL is still kicking and still doing their thing as well. So yeah, hope you have a great rest of your week. Hope you have a great weekend. Let's enjoy some ball and make the most of it while it's here. Take care.